Hello, I am Lamisila Pamela Ngubane, and this is the Entity Dynamics podcast. Entity Dynamics is a culture development consultancy where we believe that culture creates behavior and behavior creates reality. So, the title of this video is A Culture of Embracing and Integrating Our Shadow. So, it's going to be in three parts, but each part is going to have its own subtitle. So, the subtitle of this one is The Need to Embrace Solitude, or Embracing Solitude. Yes. So when you hear someone say you need to deal with your shadow, they're basically saying you need to deal with the things inside your subconscious that make you have reactions which are sometimes out of character, but usually very deeply emotional reactions to something that someone says or does to you. Okay. So we all have a shadow side. Everyone who lives on planet Earth has a shadow side. Because you can't escape storing things in your subconscious, because of either trauma or feelings of separation from other people, feeling like you're an outsider, you don't belong. All sorts of reasons why you would develop this shadow side to yourself, or even like good things about yourself that you've been taught to suppress because they make other people feel uncomfortable or they make other people feel less than, because it maybe you're outshining people and you've been conditioned that we should all be equal and no one should try and surpass anyone else. So it's things that you've suppressed. So you might find that you could even have in your shadow side deeply creative and artistic talents that you haven't been allowed to bring to the fore. Okay. So you might find that when someone talks to you about the love you have for art, that you become hyper emotional and so withdrawn, and then you become depressed and in a funk for like a couple of days afterwards because there's something inside you that needs to be addressed, but you've suppressed it, you've pushed it into the shadow, right? And you need to deal with that. So you have to embrace that and integrate it into yourself, right? Or reintegrate it into yourself. So the whole thing of the shadow came to my attention. I was listening to someone talking about Carl Jung's work, and Carl Jung was very much about the subconscious, and that's where the shadow resides, right? And I had heard of something called the Book of Shadows. Now, this is a term which refers to the practitioners of witchcraft, okay? But I heard about it when I was reading a book about Wicca, and Wicca is basically European paganism, for lack of a better word, which involves witchcraft. Okay. Witchcraft essentially is an attempt to manipulate the elements in your favor and an attempt to steer your consciousness in a particular direction, focus, amplify your consciousness. But very much so, it has to do with respecting other people's free will and not undermining it, because that's when you get into like the negative side of things, and you're going to reap very serious consequences if you undermine people's free will, try and manipulate them, but it's all about your own personal development in relation to the world in which you live, in the creation, as a created being. Anyway, it's a whole long story and it's very complicated and involved, but the point is there's something called a Book of Shadows. Now, when I heard about the Book of Shadows, I thought it was just a book of spells, right? But then I thought to myself, why don't you just call it a spell book, So as I was taking a walk and I was listening to this thing about Carl Jung and talking about the need to integrate your shadow and deal with your shadow, and in your shadow is where your strength lies, or, integrating your shadow, that's how you strengthen yourself. I remembered about the Book of Shadows and then just joined the dots in terms of how people talk about manifesting your reality and how your consciousness affects your reality, and obviously then it joins up to culture creates behavior and behavior creates reality. So I thought to myself, so probably the reason why practitioners of Wicca or witchcraft need a Book of Shadows is that they actually need to work through their shadow so that they can actually achieve their goals, their spiritual development goals, their goals in creating the life that they want. There are goals in maximizing their potential to be able to actually fulfill the purpose that they came to this planet to fulfill, right? So then I understood what it means to have a book of shadows, and it's essentially a journal, but a journal with a specific like motivation towards it, which is to look at your motivations, to look at your intentions, to interrogate yourself, So these are all things that you can only really do when you're in solitude, when you're by yourself, But now when you hear the word solitude, people tend to think, oh my God, you're isolating yourself, you're antisocial, you don't like people, you want to be alone all the time. But it's not about that. Solitude is essentially spending quality time with yourself, getting to know yourself, because you need to know yourself if you're going to know what you came to this planet to do. Because none of us come here with like a manual that's comes down from heaven and says, remember your mission, here it is. You have to actually remember it. You have to go through a process of integrating back with your spiritual self, and remembering why you came here. And the way you do that is by delving deep into who you are, thinking about yourself. And a lot of that requires you to deal with your shadow, because by the time you've reached a certain age where you can start thinking about why you came to this planet, you will have, first of all, you've forgotten, because that's part of the deal when you come to Earth, is that you forget what you were before you were here. But you've also gone through so many conditionings by the society that you live to basically make you completely identify with the physical body you live in, the physical family you were born into, the society you were born into, the gender you have, the skin color you have, the religious system that you were born into, your social economic status, the political conditions and beliefs of the people that surround you. So these are all things which have to do with the ego. The ego is the self that is crafted to help you navigate life in this particular incarnation on this planet. But at the essence, you are a spiritual being who has a spiritual mission to fulfill on this planet, right? So you use your ego essentially to fulfill that mission, okay? So I have this voice and this brain and this mouth that I speak out of, and these eyes that I use to read and watch stuff, and ears to hear things. These are all parts of my current incarnation, filtered through the ego of who I am, Ngamisile Pamela Ngubane. But on a spiritual level, I'm something more than this. But this is what I use to navigate life on this planet, okay, and to interact with other people and to experience the things I need to experience so that I can evolve spiritually, so that I can fulfill whatever mission it is that I came here to fulfill, okay? Like I said, teaching people this type of stuff and sharing the knowledge I've gained, I believe is part of my mission, and encouraging people also to fulfill their mission is also what I believe is part of my mission. So I'm using my ego to fulfill a spiritual purpose that belongs to my actual soul. Okay. So now the need for solitude is there because you can only get in touch with who you truly are and beyond this ego when you are alone. Now, I know a lot of people don't necessarily have the privilege of being able to have their own space, like their own room, or be able to go somewhere by themselves to meditate and interrogate themselves, right? But there are times in every day that you do have solitude, even when you're surrounded by people. And two such times that I can think of are when you're about to fall asleep and when you've just woken up. So I would encourage you, just before you fall asleep, just think about, who am I? What do I want to do with my life? Why am I here? What do I believe about the world? And just, and then also use that time to communicate with your creator and ask him, her, it, she, they, who you are, what you're about, because we all have contact and connection to the creator. And through the creator, we also have access to a lot of information about life and reality and the things that we don't get taught while we're being conditioned. And so, yeah, I'd encourage you, to do this work because it is very important for spiritual development.